Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the great leap ahead, and it's really looking at overcoming inflation with adopting ESG technology and the transformation that goes with that. So the first slide, just to jump into that, a little bit about WildTech, Australian owned and operated. We do offer digital transformation services across a range of industries. So we do focus in on manufacturing, retail, supply chain, professional services and financial services. And we do this through our capability. So we really do look into process optimization and consolidation of disparate systems is something we really focus on, and also making sure that the end-to-end business applications that we work with are all tier one. So we are a Microsoft Gold partner. We do work a lot with Oracle, SAP, and Wise as our core tier one platforms that support us on our journeys. A bit of an overview of today. Overview, not overdue, overview. We really look into modern ESG challenges. There's a lot of talk about what is ESG, what's it all about. We are looking at this from not a perspective of saving the environment. We're actually looking at about this as the opportunity to improve revenues and reduce costs for the businesses we support. So it's a slightly different take on ESG. Look at regulation and change and what's happening there. How do we make sure that our systems are actually enforcing and enacting the change? And how do we plot the course in the future to make sure that this sticks in the business? We just don't want to actually do it as a one-off. This is an ongoing evolution for our customers and businesses that are doing this. We look at how we're going to address the technology gap. The technology is already available, but it's evolving all the time. So we're just going to talk about how that happens, lessons from the past, and how we make so all this is integrated into the new ways of doing things and making it BAU. It's not just about doing it, like I said, once off. It's about making sure it becomes normal operations for your business. And also the final part of this is the evolution of ESG aligned technology and how we got to here. So this is what the story is all about. At the end of the day, I think for the last 200 years, we have been concentrating on this lump of rock, this barrel of oil, and these liters of petrol to produce energy. The reality is that there's only 8 kilowatts of energy that sits within that kilogram of coal. That's just one example. But for whatever it is, it's actually not a lot of energy stored there. It's quite inefficient. There are far more cost-effective choices out there. And if you think about the fact that from the sun, from the wind, from the water, you actually can generate an infinite amount of energy, the opportunities become endless. At the end of the day now, we cannot actually squeeze any more energy out of what we have in front of us, which is the coal, the gas, and the oil. So the transition is now. But in doing that, when we look at that transition away from the old ways of doing things, we've got a whole raft of issues that businesses are facing. So we have supplier sourcing. It's not just about us. It's about what are our suppliers doing. It's about an entire ecosystem now of downstream and upstream of our suppliers and our network when we're actually producing our goods and services. The regulations that governments are dropping in, they're changing all the time. And that's also resulting in higher material costs if it's not adopted properly. So there is this, it's a beautiful slide here, zigzag of issues, and wrapped up in all of this are also legal considerations about how all this happens. So these are the challenges that are facing our businesses and customers out there, and how are we going to go about it? And I think it's important to look at a particular example. This is a very interesting story. In Australia, we are having a national plastics ban. Now, that's actually going to come into effect in 2025. And the targets are quite, well, they're very strict, actually. So by 2025, 100% of the packaging that is being used by anybody who's making anything out there has to be reusable, recyclable, and compostable. 70% of plastic packaging has to be recycled or composted by 2025, and 50% of the packaging that they're actually going to be used has to have 50% recycled content. And the idea behind this is 2025, so it's 24 months away, it's 2 years away, that single-use plastic packaging is gone. Now that's the national plan, but what does that mean from a state perspective? So in Australia, every state operates in a different way. WA, for example, holds themselves up to be the pillar of green. They have a different and more stricter standard than, say, Victoria does. Tasmania is operating in its own world there. I shouldn't say that about our Tasmanian friends, but they're operating in their own world. So if you're a national supplier across states, you've actually got different hurdles to jump through in terms of the plastics ban. And it's a real issue that needs to be addressed by our supply chain and planning systems that are out there. I really love this slide, and this is really the crux of the issue, that it's not just governments, but it's also the platforms and systems that we have that need to provide the governance solutions to make certain that processes in business are actually adhering to and actually assisting businesses make this change and transition. Without that, without having the appropriate regulation, but also the ERP platforms and business systems that we are working with in place to make the change, people won't. They will simply go back to the old ways of doing things. So what we're seeing now is we as WildTech are actually helping build out these platforms to enhance and help companies make the leap, but without stifling innovation. Otherwise, we call it the leak. People will go back to the old way, and change won't occur as what it needs to happen. So it's a big issue. It's not just governments, it's also systems, it's business processes as well that need to be adopted and changed. And this is what we're working through now. So ERP platforms at the moment, they are driven to two outcomes, particularly cheapest and fastest. So what we're working with now with some of the latest generation ERPs and AI platforms is actually systemizing the change to take into account the challenges that we're seeing out there. And once we do that, it's actually sustainable change. It's not just about reporting. And I can't stress this enough. We'll talk a little bit about reporting, but the fact is the actual platforms themselves need to drive the change. The reporting will come after the event. So this is the technology gap as we see it. What right now, if you look at, say, an ecosystem of a solution, we've got packaging, we've got supplier relationships, we've got sourcing methods, and we've got material sustainability, all as inputs into our ecosystem of a supply chain business. Each one has a material part to play, and each one of those points should actually be able to be integrated into the supply chain and the ERP that the customers are using. So what do I mean by that? Well, if I look at supplier relationships, for example, do we have a supplier relationship that actually allows the two-way communication between a supplier and what they're doing in terms of their transition to the new way of doing things, so adopting renewable energy, for example, as part of a connectivity into our supply chain and our ERP, so we can report seamlessly about what's going on? Are our packaging suppliers working hand in hand with us to actually give us the information we need about content of packaging, what's happening there? Again, APIs between the network and having ERP and supply chain platforms that can actually do this is critical to success. How are we sourcing these suppliers? When we're going after new suppliers, are we looking at a catalog of suppliers, for example, that are already doing this for us, so that when we've got a selection criteria that we're providing and rewarding those suppliers that are already leapt into the new way of doing things? And obviously, material sustainability is part of that picture as well. Importantly, I left off the last part. If you look at the geopolitical factors that are at play, if you have already made the leap, the geopolitical factors that impact businesses, inflation and whatnot, are actually mitigated. So, good example, with the case in point now, those companies that have transitioned to sustainable energy, as an example, with the Ukraine war and the spike in coal prices, the spike in oil prices and gas prices, they are shielded. They've already won. So their cost in market, in terms of being able to produce their goods and services, by adopting this model and by having supply chains that are already operating this way, have been able to hold their prices steady and in fact even drop their prices. So the opportunity to not just save the environment, I hate to say it's a lovely outcome of all this, but to actually drive profit is huge. So most people know a slide like this. If you're following the ESG framework, you can see that the outcomes already are there in terms of being able to report on ESG. But if you adopt what I talked about before, you can actually have a complete end-to-end picture, not just what's happening within your organization, but actually what your suppliers are doing. Importantly, how the the whole thing is hanging together to show what is your energy consumption looking like, what are your suppliers up to, and ensuring that you've got progress around any of your carbon offsetting and things like that. They're more of the regulatory things. But again, this is an outcome. By just having this by itself, you're not going to drive the change you need. So it's really about doing all the things I talked about before to transition to the new way of doing things to drive the outcome of the dashboard that's going to be showing up here. I can't stress this enough really around how this is already happening. This is not just, pipe dream stuff. It is already happening. So this is actually a study done by McKinsey & Co. back in 2021. They did a massive study about organizations which have already leapt into the world of supporting ESG. That's not just energy transition, but also some of the other aspects of ESG. And they found that in whole, there's a 30% process efficiency that has occurred, and the revenues have actually gone up by 5 to 10%. Now, that was back in 2021. We're in 2023, so there's already a couple of years on this. We're already seeing the examples coming out right now by companies that are stretching their ERP platforms, not just looking at price and cost, but they're also embedding AI and coming up with the right answers to drive volume and scale within an ESG framework. They're winning. They're winning already. And that's what we're working with our customers right now to make certain that they're part of that cohort that is adopted this new way of doing things. Okay. I've rambled on now for a while. I'll just throw out to the rest of the group and see if we've got any questions that anybody might have. Okay, just a question from the group. Can we make improvements incrementally? Absolutely, you can. But I think you have to have a plan, and the plan has to be your end state. If you make incremental changes to some of these things, they will get lost if it's not part of an integrated plan. So my strong guidance and cadence around this is, first things first, let's set the end state. Let's set exactly where you need to go. And then the journey. We can phase the journey, but very much so you can need to actually have the master plan together to understand where you're going to land. Another question, thank you for this. Which of those elements that you had on screen would you start with? Suppliers, are suppliers the best place to start? Absolutely. If you look at the ecosystem of what's happening out there, the very, very first place to look at is what are your suppliers doing? Governments and regulation provide a framework, but just by adhering to what they're saying is not necessarily the most efficient way of doing things. Suppliers are really a critical part of this because it's the entire ecosystem now of your business that needs to be addressed. So working with your suppliers to make certain they're aligned to what you're doing and being part of the picture, integrating them into your platforms, helping them with their decision making as well is absolutely critical. You don't want to be doing this by yourself. The more you engage, the more you lean on your supply network, the better off you're going to be in time. Okay, another question. It's good today. Assuming there needs to be a series of workshops started, is this something WildTech can help to facilitate? Absolutely. This is what we're seeing now. We're working with supply chain businesses, manufacturing businesses, retailers that are all experiencing issues in this space right away. We would sit there hand in hand with any of our customers and work through their journey. It's particularly packaging is a big one at the moment, and when we're dropping in supply chain platforms and ERP platforms, embedding that with AI, helping them make the right decisions around, okay, what's the best way to adopt the changes with packaging is a classic way of looking at it. Is it better to source from someone else? Can we actually create a catalog of suppliers that are doing this for us as well and make them part of the picture and reward them for the work that they're doing and have the systems drive that? So yes, absolutely something we'd love to help with, and it's something that we're seeing a great outcome when we're working with our customers in this way. Again, we can build you a nice set of reports, but we're very much focused on what happens before the report writing. Okay. That looks like we're it for questions, I would think. I'll just let any more questions. Thank you so much, everybody. Really hope you got something out of today, something we're super excited about here at WildTech. And can't wait to work with you all in the future to take you on this great leap with ESG transformation. Thank you very much.